To kind of close out this class, I wanted to spend a moment to talk about the different IT jobs that are spanned and kind of hinted at throughout all this stuff we've talked about. Some of you maybe you're pretty far down the path and you know, hey, I want to do exactly this. Others you might be choosing what the type of thing you want to do with your career. So just take this with a grain of salt. Think of this as different options, and certainly it's an informational place where you can see the different places your peers might be impacting you later on, even if you have a specific choice in mind. But definitely take it as a way where you can specialize your studies here and find focus in the things you want to do. Because there's a lot more to IT than building code. We teach you a lot about building code here, but there's people who make great careers, who make good money, who don't build code at all. So projects are much more than just implementation. As we talked about, we want to find the scope, we want to figure out the approach. We do build it at some point, but we also test it, deploy it, and support it and manage it. All the different tasks we talked about in work breakdown structure, of those, honestly, few of them are actually done by the developers themselves. The vitally important ones are done by developers themselves, don't get me wrong, but many, many, many people contribute to the project who are not writing code and for the project. And so we started with talking about the requirements specialists. They sometimes are called analysts, sometimes they're called business analysts or system analysts. Sometimes they have different names that companies come up with. But these are the folks who really do interact with other people. It's a very people-oriented job, a very writing and communication-oriented job. They document business processes. They're the ones who need to be able to go off and learn what is the processes we're trying to automate. What is the impact we're going to have for there? And they start to define the technical needs. It's important to have a technical grounding in an analyst job. If you don't have any idea how software is built, sometimes you might be taking things down the wrong way, or you might be able to, give better options as you go off doing your work. So the next part of this then is coming up with the technology understanding to align with the business understanding. And so they're responsible for translating the business needs into technical needs. This is where they need to be good about use cases and understand use cases or other requirements gathering methodology and how to feed data into the design process. But importantly, understanding where they're drawing the line between what the system needs to do and how it does it. Honestly, the people who understand how to do design often are better at writing requirements because they know when to stop writing requirements and let the design take over. How to leave options to be sorted out. How not to say, oh, you need a PDF file here. No, you need an electronic format that shares data, which could be PDF, but doesn't have to be PDF. So there's often a role out there for just high-level designers. This is where I've lived for a number of years now. I live in the architecture space. Some people live in the information architecture space, which is around databases largely, or file transfers, or moving data around. It could be security. There are often enterprise architects who do deal with business processes and at a certain level, but more of the implementation, the vendor tools and things that go on this. This role spends their lives in that design phase we talked about, where they're building UML diagrams, or but occasionally they could be doing structured DFDs and ERDMs and stuff like that, but mostly it's an object-oriented world. They're drawing pictures to tell stories. They're drawing pictures to simplify systems, but they're also using text and documents and presentations to be able to communicate ideas, to be able to share approaches. They're the ones who are really setting the direction for the project and setting up the design team to finish up and code things successfully. You got to understand, most big software projects aren't just simply building an app. Like heck, right now Pokemon Go is all the rage, and so Pokemon Go is a very cool iPhone/Android/ perhaps Windows Phone app, but there's a whole network of things that happen behind the scenes. There's admin servers, there's sales servers, there's vendor management. There's all sorts of things that's going on there, microtransactions and credit card processors and all that sort of stuff. Somebody had to come up with this breakdown, figure out what work was happening on the phone, what work was happening on the server, how do we pick our credit card processor, how do we secure this information, all that stuff. And that's done way higher level than the coders. That's higher than developers. So there is a role out there for folks who just want to focus on solutions. Often the path to this role is through a development role, but there occasionally are ways to be able to jump right to this task. So obviously there's developers, there's people who write code, but there's many focus areas where you can write your code. You can focus on user interfaces. That could be phone apps, it could be desktop apps, it could be web apps, it could be back-end solutions, batch jobs, things like that. Server logic. You could be a tool developer. You could write tools that are only ever used by coders. Or you use tools that are used by administrators who oversee code, or you could write tools that help testers automate their tests, or performance testers test systems at a large scale by replicating work or capturing details or something like that. So there's all sorts of different types of code to write. So don't get discouraged because I didn't like web pages, or I don't want to do batch jobs. So there's many options inside of there that you could find a career in. Not everything has to be about video games, but it can be about video games, or it can be about business applications. The more diversity you have in your coding background, the more likely you're going to be able to be attractive to employers to provide that. I mean, in my career, I've worked on probably 6 different coding languages at least, but maybe more than that professionally. Certainly more than that overall. So be ready to learn more than one thing. Make yourself multi-skilled, but always be willing to learn a lot about something in order to be, a key resource in that. You don't want to know a little about everything where you're not very good, though it's often good to know a lot about enough about many things out there as well. So there's trade-offs in your career there. Now, testing is a really strong option for finding employment. Maybe even if your desire is to do one of the other phases, the best entry-level job for a new graduate might be through a testing group. I was hired to be a developer, but my first 6 months plus on the job was acting as a tester. In very complicated systems, it's the best way to come up to speed on how the system works is to test it, to understand how to create test cases and deal with the system and use the system and see how the system breaks and find where it's breaking and why it's breaking that way. And so software testing could be a career even longer. I know testers who are very, very well paid. Not always as well paid as developers, but maybe sometimes they are, because often testing has a development role to it. If I can find ways to automate tests and do tests faster using coding skills, then often I'm as valuable as the developers out there building the real system. Because let me tell you, most projects spend as much money on testing as they do on building the project, because there's so much work to check out all the stuff we did. And normally we have to do that work over and over again, because every developer mistake means I have to retest something. So if I can find a way to automate that, it certainly makes me a more desirable candidate, makes me a more powerful, more efficient, more effective tester. And so testing is a great set of jobs. Now, within this, there might be other additional roles where you could be looking at quality, you could be making release decisions and things as well. There's great management opportunities within testing as well. But consider it as a viable place to look for initial jobs if you feel like your experience isn't all that great in the development side, because it'll provide a way for you to get in and then prove yourself to go and become a developer later on as well. Now, you might not want to do any of those things. Your love, your passion might live within administration. Maybe you love dealing with hardware of computers, or maybe dealing with operating systems or installs, managing networks. There's all sorts of administration roles that live within this as well. Database administrators, there's specific applications, server type things. You could be focused on the IIS and the Windows side, or WebSphere, WebLogic, Tomcat, something along those lines. Again, database, you could be an Oracle person, a SQL Server person, a MySQL person, a Sybase person, a DB2 person. All of these are really vital roles. It's important to have folks around, particularly in big organizations, that understand the details of the software we depend on, the vendor software that is vital for us solving our problems. We need people who can optimize things, people who can install patches safely, people who can do backups and all these sorts of troubleshooting tasks that as a developer, we might not know enough about. We might not know the inner workings of these things. Over time, you probably would learn a lot of this stuff as a developer, but this could also be a viable initial path for you to learn about it, because there's often a lot of scripting and solutions you're going to do to automate this side of things as well. So some of you might say, hey, I want to be a network engineer, and that's great. Some of you might say, I want to be a security person. That fits in some overhead administration as well. And so consider those roles as viable options within IT. You might not be in the front lines of building applications, but you could be vitally important to keeping those applications up and running. And then there's oversight. So we have our project managers. We spent a lot of time the last few weeks talking about those folks, the work breakdown structures and the schedules. There's process specialists. A lot of this class is about the process. I know our company is doing a lot more on agile programming, and they have people they've hired, or they have people in jobs that their job is a process coach. Their job is to help other people understand and work through the process and how to use this process. They make improvements to the process. They teach about the process. They give feedback and create better templates and things like that. All those people report up to bosses. IT has plenty of folks who didn't come from IT initially, but these days, often the bosses and the executives come out of IT degrees. Some of you out here taking this class today might be working in IT with many, many years, and your goal is to get this degree to improve your career. And that might be to move into this management tier, to be able to make the decisions, the trade-offs, the understanding required, both technically and within the business, to make the right choices. Not every software project is about the coolest, latest technology. It's about return on investment. It's about helping the users. It's about finding ways to leverage technology for the betterment of people and the organization and the stockholders and all those sorts of things, the environment, whoever your stakeholders are. You want to help those folks, not for the sake of building cool and better technology. And that's where the management comes in, is to understand those stakeholders, those views. It's okay to have a bunch of different trade-offs and different views here. All of the roles that we talked about here and all the different phases are important. And coordinating these, being the conductor, as we can see here, is vitally important as well. Balancing the needs of, we need a secure system, we need a supportable system, we need a functional system, we need a quality system. All those things are true, but the management comes in to balance those things, to say, hey, we'll take some risks on quality in order to get to market faster. Hey, we will basically make things a little bit harder to support to make them be a little bit more secure. So we're going to encrypt all of our database and re-encrypt it with a new encryption key every 6 months. And the support people say, oh my gosh, that's so much work. It's like, yes, but the alternative is we get a break-in. And so here, at least every 6 months, it makes it harder to get a break-in. So those are the trade-offs we talk about. Hopefully now you have a big picture of what are all the different pieces in play, and can start to dive into the things you're most passionate about, but fall back on this big picture of how these pieces impact other areas and how they're all important to being a successful software project and delivering quality software solutions.